Well, welcome everyone. Hello, welcome. This is an incredible group. Welcome everyone to the Sine Institute 5-year anniversary event. And we are so pleased that you're here. We are so pleased that you're joining us on Family Weekend. I am Amy Dacey. I'm the Executive Director of the Sine Institute of Policy Politics here at American University. Thank you so much. I'm also a very proud Eagle, so it's always great. Yes, a proud Eagle. Thank you. And my very first job in Washington, D.C. was at the campus bookstore. So, but enough about me. I want to thank our co-sponsors tonight, the Kennedy Political Union, and a very new formed, incredible student group, the Bipartisan Student Group, who we're doing a lot of work with. So thank you for all your effort. I know a lot of the leadership's here tonight. And here's the thing, I also want to thank the 29 fellows, 8 distinguished lecturers, 265 guest speakers, the over 12,000 people who have participated in our events representing 64 countries and on 6 continents, and we are just getting started. We have also had over 200 students work directly with us through some of our programming, whether you're a student associate or you're on the student advisory group, or if you did the Sine Institute Certificate of Leadership. You might have already done it, but I think you're probably going to do it this next academic year, so we welcome you. I want to take a minute to thank our provost, Vicki Wilkins, and certainly Seth Grossman, who just recently got a promotion, and he's, I can't even keep up. I think he's the chief administrative officer. But when I first started out, he was the one with Vicki who really built the founding blocks of this institute. And so we are so grateful. I know they're both here tonight, and thank you for all you've done. I, of course, want to thank Samira and Jeff Sine for their incredible contributions and creating an opportunity here at AU. Being the executive director has truly been one of the most rewarding experiences for me. I've learned so much. Thank you for opening doors for all of us to do this work. Thank you. And now it is my privilege to introduce the visionary who sought out to create a university-wide institute for policy and politics and an incubator for the important work of the day here at American University. She is the 15th president of American University and the first woman to ever serve as president, Sylvia Burwell. President Burwell is an experienced leader who has spent the past 6 years helping AU excel as a leading student-centered research university. She also led the university through a historic pandemic. We are also grateful for her leadership as we navigated during those days, and started the $500 million Change Can't Wait campaign and launched AU's comprehensive strategy, Changemakers for a Changing World. Prior to AU, President Burwell did a couple of other things you might be familiar with. She was actually held 2 cabinet positions in the U.S. government, serving as Secretary of Health and Human Services and Director of the Office of Management and Budget for President Obama. She also held leader positions at 2 of the largest foundations in the world, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the Walmart Foundation. And the Sine Institute is proud to say will be adding to her bio next year as she comes to continue her work with us at the Sine Institute as a distinguished lecturer. Please join me in welcoming President Sylvia Burwell.
I just whispered, thanks, boss. Amy, thank you, and congratulations to you and the entire Sine Institute and the team for an incredible 5 years of convening, communicating, and collaborating to impact policy. Thank you to the Kennedy Political Union and AU's Bipartisan Student Group also for co-sponsoring tonight. And before I begin, I do want to acknowledge it has been a hard week and difficult week for many in our community. I do want to recognize just a few more leaders. Thank you, Amy, for your recognition of leaders, but I also want to recognize some of our members of our Board of Trustees who are with us here tonight. Mehdi Haravi and Jeff Sine are both here tonight. Jeff's name will be said many times for many, many, many things. And our faculty trustee, Lillian Beza Mendoza, is also here this evening. Lillian, thank you for coming. Thank you all for all your support of this community. And of course, I want to thank the two people who have made all this possible, Jeff and Samira Sine. Jeff and Samira, thank you. It was 5 years ago that Jeff and Samira had a vision of creating a place at the nexus of policy and politics, where people with varied points of view could come together to move solutions forward. They created the Sine Institute of Policy and Politics with a $10 million gift that provided an early boost to our $500 million campaign, Change Can't Wait. Jeff has been co-chair of that campaign and has been instrumental in getting to where we are, and I am happy to report that we are 60 million away from that goal. And we, as I like to say, this is not my last year, this is my best year, and we plan to achieve it. Thank you, Jeff and Samira, for your support and for your incredible commitment to this entire university. The Sine Institute is a great example of what we mean when we talk about change making here at American University. And in the 5 years since Sine was founded, it's brought many incredible speakers and fellows to our campus, and Amy gave you a sense of that. And as part of our commitment to experiential learning, as Amy reflected, our students get to be a part of the important work that Sine is doing. We're situated in a city that is the epicenter of our political world, on a campus with one of the most politically active student bodies in the entire U.S. And here, the Sine Institute has become a laboratory for university-wide collaboration, an incubator for policy innovation, and a place that is committed to finding solutions that come from listening to each other. I am very excited to be a part of the Sine Institute's future. No one knew it was my secret plan for my job after being president, but there you have it. While this is my last year, what I'm reflecting is, while I'm in my last year, I will, as Amy reflected, be a distinguished lecturer at Sine. I'm very much looking forward to it and looking forward to working with you all as the Sine Institute continues to grow and to build lasting change. It's now my pleasure to actually introduce the moderator for tonight's panel, a woman who is herself an accomplished change maker, Kate Bedingfield. Kate had several White House communication leadership roles during the Obama administration when we crossed paths, including Associate Communications Director, Deputy Director of Media Affairs, and Director of Rapid Response. She also served as Vice President Joe Biden's Communication Director and Deputy Campaign Manager for his 2020 presidential race. President-elect Biden tapped Kate to lead his White House communications efforts, and she served as the White House Communications Director until February of this year. She now works as a political commentator at CNN. Kate is joined tonight by an incredible panel of speakers that she'll introduce in what's going to be a great conversation. So thank you all for being here and being a part of celebrating Sine's 5th year and what we're going to do in the next 5. Thanks so much, Kate. Join us.
Hello, thank you. Can you hear me? Excellent, okay, perfect. Thank you all so much for being here. This is such an honor for me, and I think we're gonna have a really terrific conversation tonight. Obviously, as we're celebrating the 5th anniversary of Sine, there really couldn't be a more important moment for the mission of this institute. The notion that we as a country have in our politics kind of abandoned the idea that we can find common ground and that we can work together on solutions to things where we agree. If we lose sight of that, well, we can't really function as a country, and government can't really function if we've completely abandoned that idea. And so, I can tell you from my time in this White House, under this president, President Biden, that is something that he very strongly believes in. It's what sort of guides him as he's thinking about what he can do to drive change, to make life better for people. And so it's important in this moment when our politics is so hyper partisan to not lose sight of the fact that we can work together. And so the mission of this institute is just incredibly important. So I'm really thrilled to be here tonight to celebrate the 5th anniversary and to have this discussion. So I would like to welcome our panelists up to the stage here. Steve, who served as HUD Secretary under President Bush, and also represented the federal agency on the board of the TARP program, the Troubled Asset Relief Program, and did significant work under the Bush administration on issues of housing and workforce, is now CEO of Goodwill Industries International, which under which they provide services to 154 local independent Goodwill organizations across the country. And we can talk a lot more with Steve about the work that Goodwill is doing in this space. Layla is president and CEO of Millennial Action Project, which is a co-sponsor and collaborator on Sine's American Dream poll, which is a poll that the Institute has released, which has delved into particularly young people's perspectives on what the American dream means, what it means to them. And so Layla can talk a lot about that, both the poll specifically, but also her work more broadly at Millennial Action Project. Rohan is a student here at American. We're very much looking forward to getting his perspective. He and I were just talking earlier about the internship that he did in the White House last year in 2021. So he's had some real life perspective in addition to all of the terrific work that he's doing here on campus as a student leader. So he's gotten a little bit of a taste of what it's like to be kind of on the front lines of government. So we're very much looking forward to this conversation. As I say, the Institute has released a poll on the future of the American dream. I thought to get started, maybe you each could talk a little bit about what the American dream means to you, what your perspective is, what you believe the kind of key contours of the American dream are moving forward. So maybe, Steve, we'll start with you and get your perspective on that.
Yeah, sure. First of all, welcome, all of you. My wife and I have 5 kids in their 20s, so, you know, we frequently sit in parents' weekends, and it's such a wonderful time of life and such a great opportunity to celebrate the great things that your kids are doing. So the American dream, most people don't realize, but the mission of Goodwill is to help people reach their full potential through learning and work. We support probably 2 million people a year, and our focus is helping people move into employment. And so for many, in about 83% of the people we serve have a high school degree or less. So we see people every day for whom a basic foundation of education, basic workforce skills, help moving into the workforce fundamentally changes their future and then ultimately futures of their children, grandchildren. And, you know, when I think of the American dream, you know, I'm from a family where my grandfather was a coal miner. Okay? And so when I think of the American dream, I think about the richness of our economy, the richness of opportunity in our country, and how that needs to create opportunity for people to realize their potential, to realize their dreams, and in so many cases move out of fundamentally very difficult circumstances to something that is really remarkable. And we see cases of that every day, every one of our communities, and you probably know as well. And I think we need to keep the foundation of that dream alive so that everybody in our society, everybody in our communities has the opportunity to reach their potential to capture that.
So I'll start too by just saying thank you to the Sine Institute and to American University for having me here today and for your partnership on the poll, which was so exciting to work on. I'm excited to dig into it a little bit. You know, I don't normally spend a lot of time thinking about the American dream. It's kind of just a term that exists that's a part of America's mythology. It's part of sort of the essence, right, of being an American, the American dream. You hear that, and especially as the child of immigrants who came over here in their 20s from Morocco, started a family, started a business, you know, saved enough money for me to go to college, and now I have a job. Like, they achieved in a lot of ways what the American dream is. I run a nonprofit. I'm not a doctor or a lawyer, so that's not like everything on the immigrant parent bingo card of the American dream, but it's pretty good. I'm not asking them for money. And when I think about the American dream and that American dream, it strikes me that the things that they sought to build in coming to this country are a little bit different than the things that I seek out for myself. And maybe my American dream is less to do um, with, with their notion of what success looked like. But my version of success is about fulfillment and about making an impact and about having meaning and relationships and connection to other people in order to do that, to have the freedom to make and chart my own path, whatever that path should be. And I believe that other people should have the freedom to chart their own path as well. And I think when I talk with members of the group that I work with is called Millennial Action Project. We work with young elected officials. They hear from their constituents, and they themselves are all at their core trying to achieve thriving happiness, fulfillment, but the path to get there looks kind of different for everyone, and that's okay. That's what our democracy is about. That's what the Sine Institute is about. It's about this notion of creating opportunity and freedom to all get to this place however makes sense for you to get there. And so I think, as I think about the American dream and my American dream, I think the answer is there's lots of American dreams, not just one. Mine might look different from yours, and I think that, in a meta sense, is what the American dream should be.
Hello. I am very much of the kind of thoughts. I feel the same way as you do in a lot of ways. I think the American dream, as it is a part of American mythology, really does not exist in that same way anymore. I think we have maybe grown past it. And I think in a lot of ways, the American dream was made to serve a very specific population, and our population in the country has changed and evolved and grown, just as the country has changed and evolved and grown. So for me, the American dream is a lot different than my parents in the same way that they were also immigrants. They came here, and they paved the way for me to be able to go to school and achieve my dreams and be on this panel today. So it's one of those things that I don't think has such a flat answer for everyone as it once did.
Layla, I wanted to pick up on something you said. Obviously, your organization does a lot of work with local electeds across the country, and you talked about how you have seen through your work, through your own personal experience, and also through your work, a sense that the definition of the American dream has shifted. And in the poll, there was, I thought, and I obviously come at things from I have the sort of bring the political bias, but it was interesting to me that so many young people said that politics didn't really factor in their definition of the American dream, that they didn't really view it as essential. And so I'm just wondering if you think that elected officials today are connecting with young people well on this issue, because in some ways, being able to articulate that you understand what a young person wants to achieve with their life, and that you as an elected official are going to be able to help them do that, is the way you kind of bring them on board. And so I'm wondering if you're seeing that connection happening or not.
Yeah, there's a couple of issues I think that young people are experiencing as it relates to how politics does or does not relate to their lives. And I think the first thing is, it's really hard to feel connected to somebody who sits in Washington, D.C. when you're somebody living in a completely different community, miles and miles and miles away, and not necessarily interfacing with them on a regular basis. And I think we saw that in the poll, that the further away level-wise, so like the president, Congress, that feels really distant to young people, and it feels like it's difficult to get your interests represented by them or to understand what it is that they're doing. The flip side of that, though, is the more local you get and the closer to the individual, the more they saw the impact of politics and policy making. And so I think your point is so apt, that the more you can see it, the more you can touch it, the more that you can be a part whatever whatever politics means. I think the more you can draw a bright line between civics, politics, and your life. And it's a lot easier to see that when you're engaging at the state or local level than it is when presidents or Congress are making policy that are going to take several years to take root. And I think, probably the biggest example of it happening in an immediate way is when there's a crisis, when like COVID or the financial crisis happens. Then it's really easy to see how governments respond or react. But in sort of the aspirational ways that young people are hoping for change and wanting change, you really need to engage, I think, in a community-based way. The second thing I'll say that sort of gives me some hope is what young people say that they want in their elected officials is actually things that we should all be demanding from our elected officials. And the top three things that came back where we just want somebody competent, so that's like basic, right? Everybody wants to hire somebody for the job who has the basic skills. Two, they want somebody who is open to listening to different perspectives. So somebody who will work with other people, integrate their lived experiences before they make a decision. And I actually think those are the top two things that I'm seeing young elected leaders step into politics with, this openness to surround themselves with people who know more, like this sense of humility, as well as this aptitude to building coalitions in ways that are really reflective of what young people are asking for today.
Steve, I would imagine that you have a really interesting perspective on this, given that you served in the president's cabinet and now are leading an organization that is doing work on the ground at the community level, that sort of bridges the gap in some ways between the public sector and the private sector. And so I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about your experience in the public sector dealing with community crisis, and versus how that works and the connections that you see being able to form through your private sector work, and if there are differences or if they're similar.
They're big difference. I mean, so first of all, yeah, I spent over 30 years in finance and business, so I definitely have private sector. So, I think there are really important ways for public sector, private sector to think about how they intersect and how to create opportunities. So I fundamentally believe that the government's job is to create the conditions for a flourishing economy so that, our economy and our businesses can be successful, right? Businesses generate, sort of the financial wherewithal in our economy. They generate most of the jobs. We often vilify them, but there needs to be this balance between really, as I said, creating the conditions for them to flourish at the same time that the proper oversight happens. And when I say the proper conditions to flourish, I mean, think about what government needs to do in terms of, an educational system that prepares people to be able to take care of themselves, get great jobs, and to move forward. Think about infrastructure. Think about effective tax policy or regulations, right? And so it's really important for those two sectors to be aligned in a way that helps, like I said, business side flourish. At the same time, the government has a role in making sure that there is enough oversight. And so what I saw, certainly in the public sector, having led the Department of Housing and Urban Development during the housing crisis, was a horrific sort of loss of confidence and actually breakdown in our financial system. And, I actually think that was a circumstance in which government was actually not doing its job in overseeing the sector effectively. You saw there are a lot of people pass a lot of blame in that particular crisis, but I think it was everywhere. I think borrowers, getting homes they couldn't afford, mortgage originators, making loans that shouldn't have been made, et cetera, et cetera. And it was a situation where by not having the appropriate role of government in that situation, we had almost an international meltdown. And then government came back and regulated it very heavily through legislation. So, for the two sides really need to understand themselves. And government really has to understand what they're overseeing, what they're participating in. And it's not getting easier, right? I mean, back then, the financial system melted down in large part because of complex financial instruments and derivatives. Well, now we've got privacy issues online, right? Now we've got artificial intelligence. Now we have all of these incredibly complicated issues. And so there has to be a deep understanding on both sides on how best to both create opportunity and ensure that these sectors operate effectively.
There was also an element of bipartisanship to the response to the financial crisis.
There's a huge,
which
huge
in this
element.
I would shudder to think what what would happen in this day and age. So
yeah,
it's
if I
just
remember
interesting.
correctly, there were more Democrat votes than Republican votes for TARP package and for the financial, people call it the financial bailout, but effectively the package that allowed the federal government to go and inject capital into the financial system. And that is as rocky as politics felt even back then. The level of bipartisanship was fundamentally different. In the Bush administration, President Bush worked with Ted Kennedy, passed No Child Left Behind, right? He worked very closely with Democrats to try to pass immigration reform in 2007, which had very strong bipartisan support, unfortunately. But for us to figure out these pathways forward, you have to have both sides coming to the table. We have to understand opportunity and need. We have to be able to come to the table and understand a pathway forward that works for everybody.
Rohan, speaking of coming to the table, you engaged in a really unique opportunity on campus, the Uncommon Table event. Can you talk a little bit about that and what that experience was like and what you learned from that?
Absolutely. So the Uncommon Table event was, it brought together different people who may not have spoken to each other just out of, different life circumstances, different backgrounds and different thoughts on the political spectrum. The aim for it was really to focus on, the polarization that exists in this world and being able to connect people to help depolarize it a little bit. I think it was a wonderful night. We were joined by members from Berkeley. We were joined by a local community college, Northern Virginia Community College. There were 2 people from each institution sitting at the table. We shared a meal. We had conversations about different polarizing issues that are occurring in the United States right now. And it really speaks to, I think, Sine's, bipartisan mission of, convene, collaborate, and, just having that deep discussion with each other. I think one of the fantastic things that was a big part of that night was everyone had their phones, but no one took them out. For 3 to 4 hours, we all sat together, we engaged with each other, we, listened, we heard different points of view, and engaged in that respectful dialogue without needing to take a Snapchat or answer a text, which was really amazing.
Not to put you on the spot as a spokesperson for your generation, but as a member of Gen Z who is very engaged and civic-minded and politically active, do you think that sense of wanting to find common ground is present across young people? Do you get the sense from your friends, from others who are involved in politics and policy, or who are interested in politics and policy, that they come at it from a perspective, or that they're open to the idea of coming together to find common ground?
Absolutely. I think AU is very much a very politically minded institution with a very politically minded student body, and I think that has a lot to do with just being present in DC. And I get the sense from a lot of my friends, people who I take classes with, that people are tired of the polarization and the politicization of a lot of issues that really don't need to be politicized. There's definitely a lot of dialogue starting up on campus through Uncommon Table, through the work that the Sine Institute is doing, and even new student groups like the bipartisan student group that has just started up. People are interested in having that dialogue and not everything being one-sided.
Layla, across the board, getting young people involved in politics and motivating them and encouraging them to view it as impactful and important to their lives. Is a challenge that, your organization has worked on. Obviously, political campaigns all work on it. Are there issues that you think would be most productive to focus on to really to energize and motivate young people who may bring a sense of disillusionment to politics?
Yeah, and I just have to say I totally agree with everything Rohan just said, and I love the uncommon table idea. I think that is something that we should be doing more of in more places, and that's how you get to the root of where are the places where we agree, what are the things that we really will bubble up to the top of shared values, shared goals, shared issues that we want to work on. And I'll say our organization exists because we see political polarization as the single greatest threat to our generation. Political polarization, in our view, is the single biggest threat. There is no way to get durable policy solutions on things like climate or housing or jobs if you are not able to build the coalitions to get the different perspectives to actually enact them. And so I think for us, it's been really, really important to bring people together, to actually start to bring lawmakers, elected leaders together around this shared generational identity, not along a shared partisan identity, to start to explore what those issues might be. I'm just gonna go into this now. I warned Amy that I might say this, but the reason why we wanted to partner with the Sine Institute on the poll is because we were asking ourselves these questions. What are the issues that young people want to work on? And what are the issues that potentially we could see some bipartisanship on? And we asked our members, and we're in the process of doing that when Amy called me and said, hey, we want to do a poll that's exploring exactly this question: what future, what young people see in terms of what they want for their future, and what the barriers and support systems are that exist. And I wish that I could say I was immediately curious. I was about to go on a 2-week vacation, and so I tried to kick it off for as long as possible. And Amy was a little bit of a stalker and kept calling me and emailing me, and because she knew that our mission was so shared of digging deep into what is it that young people want to work on, what are the specifics. And so, I kept saying like, no, Amy. And finally, you just sent me an email with exactly what the plan would be, and I was like, I'm really interested in partnering on this. I could like taste the vacation rosé, and I was like, so it was in my grasp. And so anyway, so we do these like parallel efforts, and on the one hand, we do this research to understand what are young voters hungry for, and then separately, we had been doing all of this work to say, what are young lawmakers seeing as opportunities to work on? And we did not coordinate these two research projects. They were happening in parallel. And our innovation agenda came out with the same top issues as this youth poll. And they shouldn't be surprising. Healthcare, jobs, job training and the future of work, the environment, housing, democracy itself, the process by which we make decisions. Those are all in the top issues that young people are saying we want action on in 2024. And the good news is they are also the top issues that young lawmakers want to work on, and want to work on in a bipartisan way. And so I think that is an incredible opportunity to bridge the gap between what's happening on the inside, what's happening on the outside. And I feel really strongly that young people, Gen Zers and millennials, are going to be the ones to do that.
Can I just put a fine point on something that Layla said? Because it's so important to emphasize. The biggest issue is we can't come to the table together. So we can talk about climate change, we can talk about poverty, we can talk about all these issues, but if people can't come to the table to work through solutions, we're not going to go anywhere on any of it. And, and I think we're at a place right now, especially in politics, where people no longer lead to the same degree with policy solutions, with deep thought around these issues. People lead with thin rhetoric. They look to win the argument. They look to capture sort of, affinity. And it's just terribly destructive, because I think what we would find is in so many cases, people actually have a common end game in mind. Now, but they may not agree on exactly the right way to get there, but if they came to the table and really laid out solutions and really began to think about the possibilities on a deep level, I think we would see a fundamentally different level of progress, and it would be very positive. But it's the rhetoric, it's the fight right now, and it makes it and because of those attitudes, it almost disables people from coming together. And that's why I love so much the work you guys are doing, because you guys are addressing it among the younger population, people coming together to say, look, we got a lot in common. We have a lot to talk about. We have a lot of dreams. We have a lot of aspirations. We're not going to lead with our differences and our deeply embedded opinion.
Yeah. And I think this is one of the things that is the broadest disconnect between the way politics gets covered by the media and what people actually want. There is an incentive in the media to sort of gravitate toward the most polarized argument, the person with the hottest rhetoric, and that there are reasons for that. We could have an entire another symposium discussion on that. But what we find time and again, and what it's really encouraging to hear you say you're seeing with young people as well, is that despite what it may sort of feel like when you turn on cable news or you look at Twitter or X, most people actually want their elected officials to find solutions and to come together. And that message, is something that, again, it gets lost. It doesn't get it doesn't get rewarded in media coverage. But it is, time and again, we see it as actually what people across the country, voters who aren't really dialed into politics, aren't thinking every minute of the day about what's going on in Washington. They're thinking about living their lives. And they want to see people come together. They want to see elected officials come together and find solutions. But it's very hard in a strange way to get that argument taken seriously sometimes in the media. And I think that is a huge challenge in our politics. So it's interesting and encouraging to hear that young voters are feeling that too, because I think sometimes young voters get sort of shorthanded by the media as, they want to be as, they actually want to be as partisan as possible. And that's not true. Rohan, you look like you have something to say on this.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think if we wanted to watch people fight, we would turn on WWE, not C-SPAN. So we definitely want to see people communicate and collaborate rather than put on their best suit and duke it out on the House floor. So.
Steve, could you talk a little bit about entrepreneurship, the work you did at SBA, the impact, you did a lot of work to try to encourage entrepreneurship among particularly opportunities for veterans and military families. Could you talk a little bit about the impact that you saw that have in communities and how you feel that kind of plays a role in our national discourse too?
Yeah. So one of the truly the most fun jobs I've ever had was leading the Small Business Administration, because basically what we did was spend time trying to understand how to help small businesses, get started, flourish, grow, thrive, in addition to a number of other things. And so small business really plays a number of roles. First of all, it's the largest net job creator in our country. We've got a lot of small businesses, but small businesses, it's not really kind of a one size fits all. You've got a lot of, single person businesses. You've got a lot of mom and pops that might have, 5 or 6 people, and you have a business that, becomes the next Google, right? And one of the most important things is that, it's all of these types of businesses that really contribute to just the incredible level of dynamism in our economy and the incredible level of opportunity for seed ideas to grow and to take shape and to become something big. And as a result, small businesses are an incredibly important part of creating opportunity for people, right? Because if they become a big company like a Google, obviously they create massive opportunity. They drive our economy. A lot of us nonprofits wouldn't be around, right? If these large businesses weren't supporting us and helping us because they have the capital to do that. But I also want to talk about the fact, you mentioned one thing. One of the programs we started when I was at the SBA, and I was really so thankful that when the new administration came in, they captured the program, they actually grew it, and actually made it better in the process. It was a program to seed inner city entrepreneurship. And what we felt was that in so many parts of our urban communities, there were a lack of support services, there were a lack of small businesses, and by bringing small businesses to those areas, we would bring employment. People would invest in buildings. Their employees would need support services, and that would be a way to bring flourishing. And what we found was this was a really important part of community building, right? And I did a lot of work in the administration. One of the things the SBA does is it makes loans to disaster victims, both homeowners and businesses. So I spent a lot of time in the Gulf area after Katrina. And I'll never forget driving out of the Ninth Ward, which was just completely devastated. There were like nobody was there. It was like a ghost town still at that point. And I saw this little bodega that had a bright sign. People were washing the windows. They were stocking the shelves. There was nothing else around. But they were the first people in that neighborhood, that little small business, to anchor in there and to be part of that. And it was just such a great picture what small businesses mean to our country in so many circumstances. And I always used to say, for every dollar of equity a small business owner puts in their business, they put $10 of sweat equity into it. And, there's grit, there's, 80-hour weeks, the incredible effort they put into it, the vision they put into it. So entrepreneurship really touches our society on so many levels, in so many different ways, in providing opportunities for the individuals who start those businesses, but also in so many ways to people who benefit from them.
Rohan, I wanted to ask you about a pretty incredible experience that you had as an intern at the U.S. mission to the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva. Could you talk a little bit about that experience, what you learned from it, and just tell the folks here about what that was like?
Absolutely. So I interned at the U.S. mission to the UN Human Rights Council. It was a lot of fun. It was a very eye-opening experience. It was early on during my time at the School of International Service at American University. So I was not super educated at that time because it was so early on in the way the UN works and how the Human Rights Council itself functions. Human rights is a very big deal for me. It's something that I'm very involved in. My grandmother was actually a refugee in what the UN Human Rights Council has called the largest mass migration, which is the partition of India and Pakistan. And that was the trauma that she experienced at that time, having to, leave her home only to never see it again, to try to come to India and, find safety, essentially, is something that lived with her till her very last day. So it was truly an honor to, be a part of the Human Rights Council, even for a short time. I sat in on a lot of UN Human Rights Council. I'm just going to call it the UNHRC, so I don't say Human Rights Council 18 times. But I sat in on a lot of HRC sessions with the different countries, and they're all debating on these different topics and bringing up their specific viewpoint on a certain issue. I honestly had imagined it as a group of people who, albeit, some people who are more amicable than others, but still a group of people who would come together and have a conversation on human rights, how to further it, how to secure human rights. And it was not that. There was a lot of, people were using it as a platform to spread fake news. People were using it as a platform to further politicize human rights issues. And it was kind of sad in a few ways to see that happen. Especially because I think one of the main things that gets involved in actually protecting and advancing human rights is money. And either countries are not willing to put forth that money to protect human rights, or they're just deliberately not putting it forth for a specific population or group of people. And so it's sad that even something so basic as the right to clean water or the right to food is something that will be so deeply discussed, and yet nothing will happen because these countries can't agree on one specific topic. Any resolution that has come out of the UN Human Rights Council that has had the support of its entire governing body has been so vague that literally any country could interpret it in a different way. it's really not enough to protect human rights. And so it just opened my eyes to how much more we have to do to protect human rights across the world.
You raised an interesting point in your answer about fake news and disinformation and the impact. I'm wondering, for both of you, Layla, I'm curious if you see the impact of disinformation and fake news on young voters in terms of, their faith in government and institutions. Has that factored in? Has that kind of seeped into how young people are absorbing this political moment, or are they kind of, are they sort of digital savvy enough that they kind of feel like they can sort what's real from what's fake? Do you see, have you seen that impact in your work at all?
Yes, and I think mis and disinformation for young people, like it is for others, is a problem, and it is exacerbated by the way in which we have things like social media that can just spread it so quickly before it can be, debunked, and to flood the zone with correct information really requires, I think, quite an intentional effort. I actually think something that you mentioned earlier, which is the over coverage of real news, but hyper-partisan news, is probably more a factor in people losing faith in our institutions and our ability to solve problems. There was a study recently by a group called Starts With Us that showed that hyper-partisan politicians get 4 times the coverage as leaders who are just putting their nose down and doing policy. And so that's, they're covering actual real news, but they're doing it at a rate that is not reflective of reality. And I think that does a lot to warp people's sense of what's possible. It's something that we really try to counter in our efforts to uplift and amplify stories that might give people a way to see, okay, this is not the only archetype of what an elected leader looks like. This like flamethrower person with rhetoric, no substance, and is just trying to win is not actually representative of every type of policymaker out there. There's great leaders who are doing things on, needle exchanges, or like maternal health, or voting rights, or things that are like saving lives and changing
And
the way we do
tangible for
things.
people,
And
or things that
tangible.
have a real... Rohan, I was going to ask you again, not to make you a spokesperson for your generation, although your generation would be fortunate to have as terrific a spokesperson as
Why,
you.
thank you.
But,
I appreciate it.
But I'm curious what your perspective.
Yeah, I think I think it's so easy to get news from social media. You have it right on your hand. I know I have the New York Times app on my phone, so anytime something wrong happens, I suddenly get pinged on my watch, on my phone, everything's going off, as annoying as that might be sometimes. But it's still very easy to, as you're scrolling X, as you're scrolling down X or sitting on Instagram, to, end up seeing a little bit of news, and suddenly you take that on, right? The sad thing with social media is that even though it has brought so many people together, it's allowed humanity to, in a lot of ways, have a global voice and connect us in ways that we haven't had before. The algorithms are built in such a way that they kind of put you in a bubble of what you like. If you consume a certain kind of content more than others, you are very much going to get that content tenfold on your feed. And suddenly you are now stuck in this little part of the internet where you're like, oh my God, this is all I can see. The world must be blowing up right now. And it's not. And so I think no matter how savvy you are with technology, you are at some point going to fall into one of those holes where you think that this is a common conversation happening across the world when maybe it's not. And I think that brings on a larger conversation that we could also have a whole panel about on, the pervasiveness of social media and fake news. But I don't think that level of savviness is something that is even really possible to have at this point. You just have to try your best to not believe everything that comes up on your Twitter feed as the Bible truth. Sorry, your X feed as the Bible truth.
I think, honestly, anything that makes you feel really, really happy or really, really mad, I would double check that.
Yeah,
In either
that's a great rule of
direction.
thumb.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That is a terrific rule of thumb. Steve, could you talk a little bit about the workforce training and development that Goodwill does and the impact that you see that having in the community? Can you talk a little bit about how Goodwill is making a difference in people's lives?
Yeah, so we're all about jobs. We're all about jobs. And I think what we do affects community in our world in a lot of ways. I think it affects individuals and their family very directly. It affects our economy, and I think it affects our society. Um, Work is beyond the financial benefit it gives people and their families. I believe work is essential to human flourishing, right? It is where we go to contribute our gifts, where we are productive and get things done. It's an opportunity place where we have opportunities to develop. It's a place where we have community. And so ultimately, I think it's essential to human flourishing. And I think that's kind of what we all want, right? I mean, I want to flourish in life. And I think it's an anchor to that. And that's very important, I think, to humanity. Secondly, we're in an economy where we need skilled labor, right? We have almost 10 million unfilled jobs right now. About 6.5 people unemployed, but tens of millions of people who are underemployed or working in poverty. So we have all these great opportunities over here, and over here we have millions of people who need those opportunities. And the bridge from here to there is generally skills and other supports to help people through other life challenges they might have. If you look at where the world is going right now, the job transition in our society is accelerating. Through automation and digitization, now AI. McKinsey just came out with a report in June that said that low-wage workers are 14 times more likely to need to find a new job because of AI and digitization and automation transitions. 14 times. At the same time, we have all these new jobs being created in healthcare because of the aging population, in infrastructure, in green jobs, in logistics. But they all need skills to be able to get those. And when you talk to people in those low-wage jobs, you will hear, and we know because we've polled them, consistently they say, I've applied for jobs, but I didn't have the qualifications. And almost 80% of low-wage workers, when asked what it took to get ahead, said, I don't know the credential I need, and I don't know how to get it. If I did, I wouldn't know how to get it. So we're in this unbelievable situation where there's opportunity over here and need over here, and somehow we cannot bridge that gap through effective workforce programs. And that's kind of what we do. The third thing I'd say, though, is it's not just about the individual. It's not just about a competitive economy. It is about our society. Because if we don't solve this problem, we will see the haves and have-nots in our society drift further apart. When you talk about the American dream, it will be further out of reach for more people. You think about this is a policy institute. When you think about what it means for entitlement policy or trade policy or tax policy or any number of other things, or community divisions, we have a huge opportunity to make it better. But if we don't, it comes at a huge risk to us on so many levels. So I think the work that we do in helping people in deep needs, we help tens of thousands of people coming out of incarceration, people with addiction issues, people with educational challenges. If we can invest in people to help them realize their potential and serve the need we have in our economy and in our employers, it is a massive benefit to our communities, to our society.
It also feels like Goodwill does this in a way that transcends politics. It transcends the division, it transcends the divide, and provides these direct services, opportunities to people sort of without the baggage of partisan politics.
Absolutely. And you mentioned before, Layla, the importance of local politics. Part of that is because issues are often local, and we're embedded locally across the continent. And it does transcend politics, and it needs to, because everybody believes that people should be able to realize their dreams. Everybody believes we should invest in human potential. And I think just about everybody believes that a great pathway through work is a good thing so people can take care of themselves. We just have to get people to come around the table and talk about the policies and the solutions that help us solve the problem. And just want to say, and create the opportunity, because this is as much about opportunity as it is about a problem.
Layla, I would ask you, for people who are listening to this conversation, or people who are change makers themselves and want to create change, you know, we are admittedly in an environment where sometimes that can be very hard to do, as we've been discussing for the last hour here. Have you seen methods? Have you seen practices? Are there things that your team, your organization has done that you feel has opened the door to either bipartisan conversations in communities or just bringing disparate voices together?
Yeah. And see, I love this term of just thinking about how we can do this through direct services. And for us, our constituency that we're serving are young elected officials. And so for us, our question that we ask them are, what do you need? How can we help you? What are your barriers to actually creating the inclusive democracy and the collaborative policymaking culture that you need? And the answer was, we need permission structures so that we can actually meet people and feel like we have a safe place to have a conversation with people who are different from us. And so we now have launched a future caucus in 33 states in the country and one in Congress. Each is led by a Republican and a Democrat. And it's just a place for them to build working relationships, build friendships, build, ways to start to get to know what makes the other person tick. And through that, you start to build the plan for what are you going to change together. And so I would say for other people, that model of actually being curious about other people first, other humans, and building that relationship first is the first piece of advice I would give. The second thing that we do is we actually help them practice their professional development of building that bipartisan muscle. So, like, what are the skills that you need in order to solve a problem, to pass a piece of legislation, to negotiate effectively, and how can we give you that experience? I think creating those opportunities back home in groups of, that you're trying to get something done, like what are some of the smaller wins that you can do together? Maybe it's not achieving 100% of the big, hairy, audacious goal that you set, but is there some project that you do together that builds the muscle memory? We've done that with our lawmakers, and it starts to make it, maybe it's like going to the gym, right? You build this like coalition building muscle that gets stronger over time. Sometimes I talk about our work as a democracy gym, but more fun because it's good for everyone. And
Definitely
then,
sounds better than the gym, for sure.
and then the third thing, and I guess this is part of this, but really celebrating the wins, because I think change doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen quickly. And so to keep people motivated, to keep people engaged, I think it's really important to tell the stories of, wow, we got X thing done. And that, I think, really is important, whatever it is that you're working on, to make sure that you can celebrate those achievements in ways that keep people motivated and keep hope alive that achieving that big end goal is possible.
Terrific. So Amy will correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we now we have time for some questions from the audience. If folks have questions, maybe mic runners, I believe, perhaps?
Hi, my name is Jeffrey Cohen. I'm from Georgia, and I wanted to ask this question to Layla. You work with young people, and considering that the Senate is over 35% over 70 years old, what are the young people saying about both age limits and term limits?
Yeah, it's super depressing to know what the word gerontocracy means. Do people know what the word gerontocracy means? Why do we know that word? We shouldn't know that word. I think it's a question. There's two sort of things, right? One is, what are the people who have had really long and maybe impactful careers saying about our system when they hang on for so long, right? And two, how can we be building a bench of who succeeds them, right? Because if there isn't the talent and the confidence of people who see themselves in these roles, then it's really hard to shift what that looks like. And so I think part of the solution is empowering young people to imagine themselves as leaders, as decision makers, to get them involved You're not going to run for Senate and win as your first foray. You might, but I think really getting people involved early on and then building that sense of possibility of, if not them, then it should be me. It should be me, and it can be me. I think that's the solution to shifting what it looks like.
Right here.
So much. Hi, thank you all for speaking with us today. I'm so happy you guys were here for this panel. You each mentioned a negative aspect of growing technology, whether that's AI, social media, or even cable news. I'm curious if any of you have an opinion on the benefits that this growing technology brings for politics and policy.
So I'll say two things. I think it is really difficult for a young person to run and win elected office when they're not necessarily connected to huge networks of wealth. To run a campaign is expensive, and we've seen a lot of creative uses of social media and medium blogs, like digital technology, to get somebody's message out there in ways that are really low cost. And so I think there's a lot of advantages that can help level the playing field a little bit for first-time candidates or younger, more underrepresented people using that kind of technology. I'll say one other thing, and this isn't really in the media category of technology, but there's a lot of things that, like during COVID, when everybody had to go work remotely, that as lawmakers now having access for working moms to be able to dial into committee hearings remotely, or ways to collaborate on bill markups using like the computer and not a piece of paper. I think there's like ways in which we're making it more accessible for different types of people to be involved because of technology.
And I also think there are ways in which people having the ability to connect directly and bypass the traditional media filter can be a good thing. I mean, it's a complicated question, and there are benefits and there are frightening drawbacks, but this sort of piggybacks on what Layla was saying. It does create an opportunity for people whose voices might historically not have made it into a traditional news account to have their voice heard and to connect directly with people in their community. I mean, one of the things that we see time and again, especially in this time where our politics is very fragmented and where there are a lot of questions about trust of the media and of rising technology and what's fake and what's not. Time and time again, we see that people trust the people they know in their community. That the person who, the small business owner that they frequent, or somebody in their church, and so, opportunities for people to actually connect with each other at that local level and not have it pass through a media filter, there can be huge benefit to that. And I think it does create access in a way that, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, that wasn't true. But it's obviously not without complication and without risk in some ways.
I feel like it also, sorry.
Go ahead, Rohan.
Oh, okay. I also feel like it speaks very much to the connection thing that we were talking about earlier. I think maybe seeing a candidate on the news or reading an article by them in the Washington Post is very different than them tweeting out something in real time and then you being able to respond to it in real time, and then maybe even seeing it and responding right back to you. So I think it also is a great way to create that connection, but at the same time, we spoke a lot about the drawbacks. I won't go back into that, but.
So I want to say just a couple of, first of all, my comments on AI, I want to make sure I think there are massive benefits and massive opportunities through AI, even though in many cases it's going to have an impact on the job market. I want to actually use your question to make a slightly different point. And that is the reason we need young people going into politics, going into policy positions is because, your comment about the gerontocracy, I've sat in those congressional hearings and listened to people try to understand complex issues around derivatives, around privacy issues with companies like Google. Understand what AI means from where the good is, but where there needs to be regulation, how to do it smartly. It is hard for somebody who's you know, and I don't want, I'm not casting any aspersions, but, for people who have a hard time turning on their iPad to figure out, how to deal with some of these complex issues. And so, there is an urgent need for young people who get where the world is going, who can open up and dig into these issues and understand them, to go into policymaking positions and go into support for our legislators, because they need help. And by the way, you can't expect a legislator to know all this stuff, but we need that talent to be able to engage effectively. And by the way, a lot of what's happening in all those realms is where we happen to be most competitive, right, in the world, where we happen to generate the most economic activity from it, and we have to be able to manage that effectively.
Here.
So I was just wondering, do you guys think that a bicameral system of government is still effective when trying to bring everybody to the table?
But let me ask you, if you just had one of those right now, what it might look like. I believe it is. I believe it is effective, because I think what you find is it's harder to get things done, but sometimes that's a good thing. I think traditionally what's happened is the Senate seems to move a little bit slower, and you have, it's kind of more of a stolid organization, and the House turns over much more quickly. And that sort of yin and yang is unique in our system, but I think in a lot of ways it makes it difficult to get things done, but it also forces both sides to come together. I think we are in a in an especially broken time in our history, right? And I think we just need to, I certainly hope, pray that we can get through it, but I wouldn't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Having been in the middle of it, as frustrated as it was for me in many cases as we were trying to get legislation through on various issues, I think in a lot of ways it's a good thing.
Hello. Okay. So I have a question. My question is, how do you advise youth to compromise on issues that they are very passionate about? And I would argue that the youth is actually less willing to compromise on a lot of issues in today's society, because a lot of issues that are passionate and very important to a lot of youth, they see it as issues that are like part of their morale, part of their morality, part of their understanding of justice. However, these ideas such as morality and justice are very subjective to each individual. So on one end, someone might see something as, this is what I believe is right. On the other hand, they might believe that is right. So how do you advise youth to compromise on things that they just simply cannot compromise on?
Thank you for that question, because I think it touches on something important that we didn't mention in the panel, which is holding your values and having healthy conflict is good. That is part of our democracy, and it is useless if we all just end up some gray blob where we all agree with one another and are all the same. We need people to be passionate and to feel like they can articulate why or what it is that they are standing for. I think the problem comes up when everything rises to that same level. And so I think really understanding what is a sacred value and what is something that you're holding because there is some reason why it's been elevated to that level. I think our political culture and polarization really does tend to have this Midas touch effect where everything becomes at this like really heightened, I'm going to die on this hill thing. And if you really thought about it, there's maybe 3 or 4 things in your life that are that, and it's not every single issue. And so I think being really aware of yourself, of where those lines are and what those values are, and then defending them and being willing to engage with people who believe differently from you. And I think engaging doesn't mean talking, it's listening too. And so that I think is what my advice would be, to get really clear and crisp around what those things are, and to find somebody who wants to engage in good faith. And I think part of our democracy, I mean, not part of our democracy, our democracy is about having differences and then coming to a resolution. And so you can't have differences in resolution if you don't have people who are willing to stand up for what they believe in.
In a way, this is a fusion of the answer you just gave, Steve, and what you just said, Layla. I mean, of course, there are issues that for you personally, maybe issues of moral clarity that you would not compromise on. And our government is actually built for that. I mean, it is actually built for people to stand firm on the things that they feel morally inflexible on. And government is about, having those conversations, having those fights. Over time, you will sometimes see the march of progress bring government and bring the country forward on these big moral issues. But the Congress doesn't whipsaw around on big moral issues every day, because it's not built for that. And I would argue that's a good thing. But it is a venue for that discussion and for taking the issues where you can find common ground and finding it and moving forward. So in a way, that's kind of a perfect fusion of both of those answers.
I also think I wouldn't want you to compromise on your positions if they're held dearly. What I don't think we can compromise on is believing in the value of the individual who's across the table from you, and understanding that their beliefs may be a matter of conscience, may be a matter of their history. I heard this great story recently by a young man named Chris Singleton, who spoke to a group of us whose mother had been unfortunately killed in the Charleston church shooting. And he was a 18, 19-year-old kid at the time. And he tells this story about how vehemently he is opposed to gun ownership, and how it represents something so horrific from him. He would never advocate for it. He would never own a gun, et cetera, et cetera. But one of his closest friends is a hunter. Very different part of the country, very different background. And what he said is this guy loves his guns. He said the reason he loves his guns is because at the earliest age, he grew up going hunting with his grandfather. His grandfather taught him how to hold a gun, how to shoot it. During hunting season, they spent it together. It was part of their lives together. And there was a part of his life that was so rich and so important to him that was tied up in shooting. And these were very close friends. And I have to tell you, that story really struck me, because I grew up in Wisconsin, where you could get off of school for being sick, having a death in the family, or deer hunting season. But I've lived my life in New York City, Chicago, and Washington. And so I see I see how wide that gap is, and how strongly held those positions are. But those two guys love each other, right? And they understand that they come to them, and what this young man said was, people come to their positions either because of what they've been taught or the experience that they've had, what they've been taught or the experiences they've had. And when we understand a lot of what we believe is part of our pathways and part of how we've developed, but at our core, there's so much, there's so much good in other people, and so much to care about, so much to respect. It allows us to have vehement disagreements with, completely disagree, and still care about them as individuals. And I think that's where we need to be.
I think that that was amazing. I think love it. I think that I also agree. I don't think that you should compromise on anything that you morally believe in, or whatever the case may be. I think the fact is that you have to be open to conversation, and you have to be open to listening to other people. And I think that's where a lot of people struggle, is morally believing something is right and then not willing to listen to another side. And I think that's where even bring back things like the uncommon table or the caucus that you were mentioning, where it's more about understanding each other and where the other person is coming from, not necessarily, sacrificing your morality. I think that's like the biggest key.
And the last thing that I'll add to that is, I think there's two ways that you can look at your role in this. And I think the first is something I mentioned before, right? Like this democracy gym. It's really good for everyone if we all get a little bit more comfortable with that kind of disagreement and that kind of conflict. It doesn't mean that you have to change somebody's mind or you have to walk away from that conversation with a solution, but getting more familiar with that feeling of discomfort. Nobody wants to argue and be, in that position, but we have to, we must. And so I think doing it for the good of being able to have these conversations be more commonplace, I think that's one reason to do it. If that's not the thing that's going to motivate you, use it as a way to practice getting your argument really sharp. Maybe they'll ask you questions that you haven't thought about, and it'll force you to sharpen why you believe what you believe. And I think that in and of itself too is really valuable.
So I think we have time for one more. Yes, agreed. Love that. Excellent answer. I think we have time for one more.
Hi, thank you so much all for coming today. Just to sorry, my name is Samantha Hessel. I'm a second year student here, and I've done some student work with Sine. I'm the current 2023-2024 chair of the Student Advisory Board. So across the board, thank you.
Yay, Samantha.
Rohan and I actually sat on the Uncommon Table discussion late last year.
Same table.
Same table. It was really good food, so thank you for that. But kind of just to bounce off of the question of and the Uncommon Table point as well, we've obviously laid out why it's important to have these conversations. But as a younger member of our generation, I find it very hard to see the how. So how, from your point of view, do we kind of convince people that are so rooted in these ways of polarization and these ways of not wanting to hear the other side to come to the Uncommon Table and sit down with people and have those conversations that are so critical to solving these issues?
I think everyone will have thoughts on this. I think the first thing I would say is don't give up. Don't let it exhaust you. Don't let it beat you down. Easier said than done sometimes. I mean, there are times when it can feel really overwhelming and it can feel really like sort of what's the point here? But from my experience in politics and government, the vast majority of people want to have a rational, reasonable conversation. The vast majority of people fundamentally want the same things. They want dignity, they want a job, they want to be able to take care of their family, they want to be healthy. And even in the kind of darkest times when you feel like there's no path forward, or some small policy piece that you're really invested in, that you really, really care about, that looks like it's on the 1 yard line and then Congress scuttles it, is, can be really demoralizing. But in the grand scheme, largely, we move forward. And I think the most important thing I would say to a young person who is engaged and interested and passionate is to keep having the conversations, because they do matter. And at the end of the day, you can look back and see progress. It may not be everything you want. It may, like I say, it may sometimes feel like you run into a brick wall and you think, like, am I really going to get up tomorrow and run into this brick wall again? But slowly the brick wall moves, because mostly people have a shared sense of wanting to make the country better, wanting to make the world better. And I think it's, again, we sort of touched on this earlier, but there is so much oxygen given to the hottest rhetoric, the angriest voices. And it can be really dangerous. It can also be empty calories, It can also be like cotton candy, where it seems like it's delicious, but it's nothing. And so I think not letting those voices always win, and not losing a sense of belief that the work is worth doing and that the conversations are worth having, is really, at the end of the day, the thing that moves the ball forward.
Well, I'm going to get into some tactics, because I think what we found is, right, we're trying to get a bunch of elected Democrats and Republicans to sit down and hang out with each other. We better damn well sure have a good reason to have them show up. And I think that figuring out the value proposition for them, right, like if they are going to take time out of their day, still to feed, I think, this core human desire of wanting to be heard and wanting to engage productively. But they've got a busy day. They've got things to do. How do you get them to show up to a thing like this? You've got to figure out what's the reason. for us, they told us we need professional development as young leaders. We need access to really smart policy people who can help us figure out what to legislate, and we need people who can help us tell our story effectively. And we said, great, we'll build that. Come to our thing, come to the Future Caucus, and we will build that for you. And they show up, and then they come because they see really how the process informs and advances the outcomes that they're trying to get. And so, I would suggest for you, as you're trying to bring students together, bring people together, even though I literally just told this gentleman to basically eat your civic broccoli, you can't tell them you have to eat your civic broccoli. You have to figure out how do you make the event feel like candy so that they want to show up and engage. And I think by showing up and the repetition of that is how you then grow that event.
I don't think this is going to turn on a dime. I think it took us a while to get here, and it's sort of gathered steam. It does feel like we might be at a turning point, but I think it's incumbent upon all of us to do a couple of things, and especially the students in the room who are spending a lot at the Policy Institute. You're learning great skills. You're learning how to do research. You're learning how to evaluate things. Go into those places with an open mind. Go into those places with humility. Go into those places seeking what you believe the truth is. All the research says, there's huge confirmation bias among a lot of us. Move that to the side. Be willing to have your mind changed, number one, and be open enough for that. And stand for something better. All of us are in a room where we just get sort of assaulted with this stuff. And if we can just all start saying, let's think about a different way here. And I do think it's going to require a groundswell of our population to just expect better. But I also urge all of you who are going into the policy world, look for what you believe the truth is. Be willing to have your mind changed and invest heavily in finding the best solutions because that's really, really what we need right now in the country.
I think especially in this time, as President Burwell mentioned, that there was a lot that has gone on in this last week. I think it's especially important to be able to engage in dialogue, not even just in times of crisis, but even in times outside of crisis where we're just living our lives, even though it feels like every moment is a crisis sometimes, and that's okay. But creating a space where you feel like you can engage with people that are maybe not in your circle and not what you believe in, I think is the number one thing that has made it easier for me to kind of get people involved. I think more than people are interested in having that experience of talking to someone on a respectful and peaceful level about issues that maybe you both disagree on. And I think not every situation has to turn into a battle. You just have to have that mutual respect for each other as human beings and be willing to listen to something other than what you believe in order to be able to create a space of dialogue and understanding, which we did at the Uncommon Table. So.
Well, what a great note to end on. Can we thank our panelists and our moderator this evening? Thank you all so much for coming. Thank you again to our panelists and our incredible moderator. Thank you to President Sylvia Burwell, to the Sines who so graciously support our work. At Sine, you're absolutely right, Rohan. We like to say we convene, communicate, and collaborate. I think we've done a great job convening and communicating, and I think we've been given some of the tools to figure out the collaboration. So far, we've done really great job on that. And what I would like to say when you leave here today, here's some action items. Could you sign up on the Sine social media channels? Can you make sure to get our newsletter? We want you engaged and continue to be engaged into our work. And please, we are also going to announce our 2024 class of fellows and distinguished lecturers on November 14th. Be ready, because we're going to bring some incredible voices to campus. I also want to thank, these things I always say, they take weeks and weeks and weeks to plan, and then they're over so fast. So I just want to thank some people, and I won't be able to thank all of them, but I know Karen Casella and her team, Beth O'Brien and her team. There literally was athletic people practicing in this area we're in just mere hours ago, and a team came in and flipped this around to make this all work for you. So can we just thank them for all of their efforts? And of course, to the Sine team, too, I just want to personally thank you for all you do. Karen will kill me if I don't. I also have an announcement for everybody. So tomorrow's Student Musical Showcase and Family Weekend Farewell will move indoors to our rain site. That's the Tavern in the Mary Graydon Center at 10 a.m. We hope to all see you there. So as we mentioned, we did collaborate with two incredible student groups. One was the Bipartisan Student Group led by Jack Giardi, and then the Kennedy Political Union. This is my friend, my colleague, Shreya Joshi. It has been so incredible working with you. We're going to do a lot of work together this year. I'd love for you to take a moment and say a few things.
Thank you so much, Amy, for the lovely introduction. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. My name is Shreya Joshi, and I'm the director of the Kennedy Political Union. Along with being director, I'm also a very proud Eagle, majoring in political science and business administration. The Kennedy Political Union is a nonpartisan central political programming board at American University. We bring the most politically relevant and impactful speakers to engage with the AU community and to focus on important issues across the political spectrum. The Kennedy Political Union also provides impactful dialogues around current political issues in order to curate meaningful conversations. The Kennedy Political Union and Sine have been working together for many, many years now, and this partnership has allowed our university to bring diverse voices to campus and inspire the student body. So thank you again, Amy, for everything.
Thank you. We promise to continue to reimagine the American dream together. The next 5 years will be incredible, I promise. So please join us. Everybody have a great evening. Thank you so much.